Hip-hop has always been about style, energy, and looking larger than life. But not every rapper has managed to keep that same glow as the years go by. For some of the biggest names in the game, time hasn't been kind at all. What used to be fresh faces and unstoppable confidence has now been replaced with tired looks, scars, and the weight of everything they've been through. This isn't the story of rappers aging gracefully. This is the other side, the rappers who have aged terribly. Let's take a look at 10 of them. Starting at number 10, we have Lil Wayne. Between 2004 and 2008, Lil Wayne wasn't just another rapper, he was the heartbeat of hip-hop. With his non-stop mixtape run and the monster success of The Carter III, Wayne declared himself the best rapper alive. And it was hard to argue. He had a unique look, endless energy, and a level of creativity that made him seem unstoppable. But the spotlight hid a dangerous reality. Behind the hits and the fame, Wayne had developed a heavy dependence on lean, also called scissor. The drink, made from prescription-strength cough syrup mixed with soda, became his trademark. But it was also quietly destroying him. Lean is laced with codeine and promethazine, and over time, it took a serious toll on his health. He has openly said he has battled epilepsy since childhood, but the constant abuse of lean only made his condition worse. Fans began hearing about his seizures, and they weren't just rumors. They were terrifying, life-threatening episodes that left him in and out of hospitals. In 2013, it nearly killed him. Reports surfaced that during one of the worst seizures of his life, his heart rate dropped to around 30%. For a while, many thought he wouldn't make it out alive. Even after that scare, the problem didn't disappear. The seizures continued to haunt him, sometimes striking while he was on tour or even mid-flight, forcing emergency landings. It became clear that Lil Wayne's lifestyle was putting him in constant danger, and no amount of fame or money could shield him from the damage. Fans began to notice the changes too. The man who once had endless energy and a youthful swagger started to look worn down. His body looked frailer, his face older, and there was a tiredness in his appearance that spoke louder than any words. Today, Wayne is still creating music, and his fan base remains loyal. But when you compare him now to the peak of his career, the difference is stark. The tattoos are still there, the dreadlocks are still there, and the legend is still intact. But his physical transformation tells its own story. He is only in his early 40s, yet years of addiction, seizures, and health battles have aged him far beyond his years. Moving on to number 9, we have Flavor Flav. During the golden era of Public Enemy in the late 1980 seconds and early 1990 seconds, Flavor Flav was one of hip-hop's most recognizable and beloved figures. As the group's hype man, he was a whirlwind of playful energy, instantly identifiable by his signature oversized clock necklace, gold teeth, and his famous catchphrase, "Yeah boy." His cartoonish persona was the perfect foil to Chuck D's serious political rhymes, and together they formed one of the most influential groups in music history. But away from the stage, William Drayton Jr. was trapped in a very different reality. Flav has been open about his struggle with crack cocaine, admitting that it started in the 1990 seconds and consumed much of his life for years. This wasn't a casual habit. At his lowest point, he revealed that he was spending between $2,400 and $2,600 every single day on drugs, and he kept that up for about 6 years straight. That's nearly $1 million blown away on addiction. His stage persona was fun and energetic, but his personal life was falling apart with arrests for assault, drug possession, and constant legal problems. The years of abuse left scars that even time couldn't heal. Although Flavor Flav has embraced sobriety in recent years and proudly talks about his journey, the damage is still visible. His once youthful face is now marked with deep lines. His body looks weathered, and he carries the look of someone who has lived through decades of chaos. Fans who remember him bouncing across stages in the 80 seconds and 90 seconds are often shocked by how much he has changed. Even with all the struggles, Flavor Flav is still around, still appearing on TV, still showing up to surprise younger fans who grew up only knowing him from memes and reality shows. He remains a pop culture figure, still recognizable, but the contrast between his past and present is striking. At number 8, we have Scott Storch. In the early 2000s, Scott Storch was living a dream that most people in music could only imagine. He wasn't the man in front of the camera, but behind the scenes, he was the golden touch of hip-hop and pop. Every beat he made seemed to turn into a hit. He helped craft Dr. Dre's iconic Still DRE, gave 50 Cent one of his biggest songs with Candy Shop, and shaped the sound of Beyoncé's Baby Boy. Artists lined up to work with him because his production guaranteed success. With every hit, his legend grew, and so did his fortune. At the height of his career, he was worth an estimated $100 million, and he spent it like money would never run out. He owned fleets of exotic cars, private jets, and even a massive yacht. Everywhere he went, he had the image of a man who had figured it all out. His clean-cut look and confident smile made him the picture of success. And for a while, Scott Storch looked unstoppable, but the same fast life that made him a star also became the reason for his downfall. Fame and fortune opened the door to temptation, and Storch fell headfirst into a devastating addiction. What started as partying turned into a habit so destructive it nearly erased everything he had worked for. In one of music's most shocking collapses, Storch managed to burn through an estimated $70 to $100 million in just under a year. His days became a blur of wild parties, reckless spending, and poor decisions. The man who once controlled studios was now being controlled by At one point, he even faced an arrest for grand theft auto after failing to make payments on a leased Bentley. A humiliating turn for someone who once bought luxury cars like they were toys. The physical and emotional toll was brutal. His once sharp, healthy look was gone, replaced by a hollow and tired appearance, as if he were battling demons. His name, once synonymous with hits, became a cautionary tale about how fast it can all disappear when addiction takes over. For years, Scott Storch vanished from the spotlight, a ghost of the man who once dominated the charts. Somehow, he clawed his way back. After hitting rock bottom, he entered rehab, embraced sobriety, and slowly rebuilt his career. Against all odds, he returned to producing music for major artists again, proving that his talent never left him, even if his lifestyle nearly destroyed him. The DOC is the next rapper on our list. In 1989, Tracy Lynn Curry, better known as the DOC, looked like he was destined for greatness. His debut album, No One Can Do It Better, was more than just a hit, it was a masterpiece. He was closely tied to NWA, helping shape the rise of West Coast hip-hop. And with his talent, it seemed like he was ready to stand alongside the greats. But just 5 months after his debut album dropped, his life changed forever. After a night of partying in November 1989, he got behind the wheel of his car. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and when he fell asleep at the wheel, the car crashed. The impact was devastating. He was thrown face first into a tree, and the accident crushed his larynx. To save his life, doctors had to insert a tube into his throat, but that procedure left permanent damage to his vocal cords. The man with one of the most powerful voices in hip-hop suddenly had his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper. For a rapper whose gift was his voice, it was the ultimate tragedy. The accident ended his career as a performer in an instant. The DOC went from being hip-hop's next big star to one of the genre's biggest what-if stories. Imagine being at the top, only to have it all ripped away in a single night. His voice, which once roared with power, was silenced forever, and with it went his chance to stand on stage as one of the greatest to ever do it. Yet, even with his career as a rapper behind him, he refused to disappear. Instead, he became one of hip-hop's most important ghostwriters. His pen gave life to Dr. Dre's The Chronic and Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style, two albums that defined an entire generation of rap. His words were everywhere, even if his voice wasn't. Millions of people recited his lyrics without even knowing they were his. That became his legacy, the man who lost everything but still found a way to shape the culture from the shadows. When fans talk about rappers who have aged terribly, the DOC stands out not just because of how he looks or sounds now, but because of how cruelly time and circumstance changed him. He could have been one of the greatest rappers of all time, but instead, he became a tragic figure in hip-hop, remembered as much for what he lost as for what he achieved. Coming in at number 6 is Cassidy. Back in the mid-2000s, Cassidy was one of the brightest young stars in hip-hop. Born Barry Adrian Reese in Philadelphia, he had already built a reputation as a fierce battle rapper before breaking into the mainstream. His clever punchlines and sharp delivery made him a standout talent, and when he dropped hits like Hotel with R. Kelly and the street anthem, I'm a Hustler, he looked destined to be around for a long time. At that time, Cassidy had the looks, the fame, and the momentum to be one of the biggest names in rap, but everything changed in an instant. On the night of the 5th of October 2006, Cassidy's life nearly ended in a horrific car crash. He was riding as a passenger in an SUV when a U-Haul truck suddenly swerved into oncoming traffic and slammed directly into his vehicle. The impact was devastating. Cassidy suffered a fractured skull and several broken bones on the left side of his face. His injuries were so severe that he fell into a coma for almost 8 days. When he finally woke up, the nightmare wasn't over. He had lost much of his memory. Imagine being a rapper known for your wordplay, only to wake up and not even remember your own songs. That was Cassidy's reality. He struggled to recall basic details about his life and the names of people he knew. Somehow, he fought his way back. Through time, therapy, and sheer determination, Cassidy began to relearn his lyrics and step back into the music scene. His comeback showed just how much resilience he had. But while his talent never left him, the accident left permanent scars that he could never hide. If you look at him now, the toll of that crash is written all over his face. The once youthful, fresh look he had during his peak years is long gone. His face carries visible scars from the injuries, and the trauma aged him in a way no fame or fortune could ever reverse. Next up is Suge Knight. There was a time when Marion Suge Knight was the most feared man in hip-hop. In the early and mid-1990 seconds, he was larger than life, both literally and figuratively. As the CEO of Death Row Records, Suge built a dynasty that changed the face of rap forever. He had Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac Shakur all under one roof, and together they dominated the charts while reshaping the culture. Suge was always easy to spot, towering over everyone else, a cigar in hand, wearing a smirk that said he was untouchable. His size, his reputation, and his connections made him one of the most intimidating figures the music industry had ever seen. But that power came with darkness, and over time, it all started to catch up with him. Suge's downfall wasn't one dramatic fall, but a slow collapse that stretched over decades. In 1996, he landed his first serious prison sentence after violating probation, and that was only the beginning. What followed was a seemingly endless cycle of arrests, parole violations, and violent incidents that kept his name in headlines for all the wrong reasons. He was shot multiple times in separate incidents, survived attempts on his life, and kept returning to courtrooms and prison cells. The empire he built with Death Row began to crumble. As artists left, lawsuits piled up, and his influence in the industry disappeared piece by piece. By the time Death Row collapsed, Suge had gone from kingmaker to cautionary tale. The breaking point came in 2015. When he was involved in a hit-and-run outside a Los Angeles burger stand that left one man dead and another seriously injured. Suge claimed he was fleeing from attackers, but the court didn't see it that way. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison, sealing the fate of a man who once seemed bigger than the law itself. If you look at Suge Knight today, the difference is almost unbelievable. The man who once filled rooms with his presence and terrified rivals is now barely recognizable. Prison photos show him thinner, frailer, and visibly aged far beyond his actual years. The weight loss is stark, his body looks worn down, and his face tells the story of someone who has carried decades of battles, both in the streets and in the courts. His once imposing frame has given way to a weakened shell of what it used to be. At number 4, we have Juelz Santana. Back in the early 2000s, Juelz Santana was the face of youth and swagger in hip-hop. With his signature bandana, flashy Harlem style, and a voice full of energy, he became one of the breakout stars of the Diplomats, better known as Dipset. At a time when the crew was taking over rap with their unapologetic New York sound, Juelz stood out as the young star who had both the charisma and the look to go mainstream. He wasn't just holding his own on group records. He was dropping hits of his own, like There It Go, the Whistle song, which became an anthem. He even crossed into pop territory with Chris Brown's chart-topping single Run It, proving that his appeal stretched far beyond Harlem. At his peak, Juelz had the image of someone who could stay young forever, riding the wave of Dipset's dominance with his playful confidence and undeniable style. But the years that followed were not kind to him. Legal troubles, personal struggles, and industry setbacks slowly chipped away at the career that once seemed unstoppable. The most dramatic blow came in March 2018, when Juelz was arrested at Newark Liberty International Airport after trying to bring a loaded handgun onto a plane. When security discovered the weapon, he panicked and fled the airport, an incident that made national headlines. Days later, he turned himself in, and by December that year, he was sentenced to 27 months in federal prison. Prison is something that changes everyone, and Juelz was no exception. After serving about 19 months, he was released in August 2020, but the man who walked out was not the same as the one fans remembered from the early 2000s. The youthful shine that once defined him had faded. The stress of incarceration, along with the toll of years spent in the spotlight and battling personal demons, was etched into his face. Photos from his release told the story clearly. His eyes looked heavier, his face carried the weight of hardship, and the playful grin that once seemed glued to him had been replaced by a tired, worn-down expression. Today, Juelz Santana is back performing and trying to rebuild his career, but the changes changes are there for everyone to see. While he still carries himself with the confidence that made him famous, his physical appearance reflects everything he has been through. Lil' Kim is number 3 on our list. As the queen bee of junior MAFIA, she came onto the scene with a confidence that hip-hop had never seen from a woman before. Her style was loud, bold, and unapologetically sexual. She turned heads with her colorful wigs, eye-popping outfits, and raw delivery that matched her fearless image. But behind all the fashion statements and shock value was a young woman who was naturally beautiful. During her hardcore era, her round cheeks, dark skin, and radiant smile gave her a look that was as authentic as it was powerful. But what fans didn't see at the time was the quiet storm she was living through. Kim has spoken openly about the abuse and trauma that scarred her both physically and emotionally. Her journey with surgery didn't start because of vanity or a hunger for attention. It began after a violent relationship left her with a broken nose that needed reconstructive work. That one necessary surgery opened the door to more. What started as repairing damage slowly became an attempt to reshape herself into what she thought men wanted. She admitted that the men she loved and trusted cheated on her with women who had straighter noses, lighter skin, or thinner features. Even the notorious B.I.G., her mentor and lover, was part of that painful pattern. Over time, those insecurities began to eat away at her, pushing her toward more and more changes. The results of that struggle are written across her face today. Lil' Kim's appearance has been transformed so drastically that she is almost unrecognizable from the woman who first shook up the industry. Over the years, she has undergone multiple nose jobs, cheek and chin implants, lip fillers, and even skin lightening. Each procedure took her further away from the face fans once knew. The round features and glowing dark complexion that defined her natural beauty in the 1,990 seconds have been replaced by sharper, almost plastic-like angles. Her skin tone is dramatically lighter, her nose thinner, and her face far tighter than her age would naturally allow. When people talk about rappers who have aged terribly, Kim is often mentioned, not because of natural aging, but because of the extreme path she took trying to rebuild her identity after years of pain. Moving on to number 2, we have Foxy Brown. Around the same time Lil' Kim was conquering the world, Brooklyn had another young queen making noise. Foxy Brown was barely out of her teens when she became one of the fiercest voices in hip-hop. With her striking looks, sultry presence, and a voice that could cut through any beat, she was everywhere in the late 1,990 seconds. Foxy was part of The Firm alongside Nas, AZ, and Nature, and her collaborations with Jay-Z made her one of the most in-demand female rappers of her generation. She had the beauty, the confidence, and the lyrical firepower to go toe-to-toe with anyone. For a moment, it looked like Foxy and Kim were set up to be hip-hop's two unstoppable female icons, ruling from opposite ends of New York. But in 2005, just as she was preparing to launch the next chapter of her career, Foxy's world collapsed. Out of nowhere, she lost her hearing. She revealed that she had been diagnosed with sudden severe sensory neural hearing loss, a rare condition that left her unable to hear anyone's voice for 6 months. Imagine being one of the sharpest rappers alive, living off rhythm, sound, and wordplay, only to wake up one day in silence. For Foxy, it was devastating. She was forced to delay her album, step away from the stage, and watch as her momentum came to a screeching halt. Although surgery eventually restored some of her hearing, the damage had already been done. By the time she returned, the industry had moved on. Her comeback attempts were overshadowed by legal troubles and public feuds, and the once confident Foxy seemed to fade from the spotlight. Years of stress and disappointment left their mark on her physically. The glow and sharpness she had in her 20s were gone, replaced by a weary look that told the story of her struggles. Her once fit frame has changed, and her face reflects the toll of both her health battles and the chaos that followed them. Now at number 1, we have Kid Cudi. When Kid Cudi burst onto the scene in 2008, he didn't look or sound like anyone else. While most rappers were chasing money and status, Cudi was writing about loneliness, sadness, and escaping into his own mind. His debut mixtape, A Kid Named Cudi, and his first album, Man on the Moon, The End of Day, turned him into a voice for kids who felt like they didn't belong anywhere. He had a youthful, boyish look with wide eyes and a disarming smile that made him seem approachable, almost like the kid next door who somehow ended up changing hip-hop. But behind the music, Cudi was fighting battles far darker than his lyrics even hinted at. He has spoken openly about living with depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts since he was young. Fame only made those feelings heavier. To cope, he turned to not for fun, but to keep himself alive. He once admitted that he used because he had what he called a death wish, and was the only thing that stopped him from pulling the trigger on himself. That raw honesty shocked the world, but it also showed just how much pain he had been carrying all along. By 2016, everything came crashing down. Cootie checked himself into rehab after years of trying to mask his struggles with drugs and alcohol. But while in treatment, something terrifying happened. He suffered a stroke that nearly cost him his ability to speak and move. For a moment, it looked like one of hip-hop's most creative minds might never recover. He described it as feeling like his brain had been damaged, and the experience left him shaken and permanently changed. Cootie survived, but the scars of his battles are visible today. The fresh-faced kid from Cleveland, who once looked like the voice of a new generation, now carries the weight of everything he has been through. His face shows the stress of years spent in darkness. His body looks worn from the fights with addiction, and his eyes no longer have that same spark of innocence. Instead, they tell the story of someone who has seen the edge and pulled himself back.